Having some technical difficulties. So first of all, I have a new home studio. We moved. Part of the problem was I was painting, obviously, in our home. It was very small, only 600 square feet. So my paintings were getting a bit in the way. So we needed to move. So yeah, I'm sitting here in my new studio. I'm not going to show you yet. I will do a reveal when I'm finished setting it up. It's still a little bit in boxes, but this is my first time painting in here. And so I have been working on these two little portraits. They're both in acrylic. However, I think I will do the background on them in oil paint just because I like the way oil paints blend. And I am using I'm using regular oil paint, so the Winsor Newton Professional line. However, I did manage to get the medium W from Schmicke, and I'll show you guys this in another video, but basically it's this medium where you can add it to your oil paints and it turns them into water soluble, which is just so handy. Going to grab my reference back up here. So yeah, the client sent me these photos and I have been working on them pretty diligently. So I start with a grisaille first. I paint the whole thing in black and white. And then I do the color layers over top. And so I'm using a fairly minimal palette on this one. A raw umber, yellow ochre, a transparent red oxide for the reds and oranges, and then white and just black, like an ivory black. And then obviously some greens in here. You can actually make really nice greens with just yellow and black, especially if you're using an ivory black because it does have a nice blue cast to it. So yeah, these are my first new paintings. And actually I wanted to kind of mention, so the other day I got an email or a message, whatever, on Instagram. It's like, I love your art. Do you take commissions? And I am always sort of skeptical of these because most of them, unfortunately, are scams. So one thing that I have done, just a minute, Mommy is calling. Hang up on her. So one thing that I have done is set up sort of a sales platform on my Etsy. And then on my website, because, building e-commerce websites can get quite expensive. So I'm using my Etsy as my e-commerce, also a platform. And then I'm just setting up my buttons to link to the exact sales page for my products. So it's kind of a bit of a workaround that's a little bit sort of cheaper. And then I also get that foot traffic that Etsy brings me. So that's kind of handy. So long story short, I do have listings for my pet portraits on my Etsy. And the fun thing is my clients pay me upfront and send me the photos, and then I get to work from there. And so I never start a job without being paid in full first. And it just kind of, protects me from working without pay or people changing their minds. Like, they're already invested in this project or painting when I start. So I haven't had a hard time getting payment upfront for things. I don't ask for deposit. It gets too complicated. They just pay upfront. With Etsy, you get a lot of reviews and there's like a sort of track record of sales there, and there's protection for both buyer and seller. So all around, I find it to be really handy. So the other part of this then is that when I get these messages about can you do a commission of my dog? I really like your painting, and they come through whatever social media site. I'm always skeptical, but I like to give people the benefit of the doubt, and this may genuinely be an interested paying client. So I will get a tiny bit more information from them first without investing too far in them. So I just kind of ask, what piece was speaking to them that prompted them to write me, and usually they'll send me a couple photos of their pets or some animals. I'm never sure at this point. And then I say, okay, well, here's the link to my sales page on Etsy. How about you look over the information, decide the size that you want and the price point that you want, and then we'll go from there. So if it is a real client, they will come back with specific questions, or they'll say, okay, perfect. I really love like that size, and I think for my budget that works. And then we'll just go from there, and they'll put the order through, and then I start working on it, and it just kind of everything is just sort of hunky dory. But if it is not a legit client and this is a scam, usually they'll say something like, oh, I don't like links, or I don't like buying things online, or I just want to, can't we just talk here? It's always like, can't we just continue the communication, the conversation on the Messenger platform? And what they're trying to do is control the conversation. And usually what they will be doing is they will be, they'll basically get you to work on the thing, and it's a bogus project. You are wasting your time. And then what they will do is, from what I understand, from what I've heard from other artists, they will send you a payment in the form of a check that is for too much money. And then they will ask you to e-transfer them the difference. So let's say, I'm charging $500 for a painting. They'll send me a check for $700, and they'll give some sort of weird song and dance while they couldn't just send me the correct amount in the first place. And then they will ask me to reimburse them the extra $200 on the check. So then you've sent them and you transfer for $200, and then you go to cash their check for $700, only to be told by the bank that it's not even a real check. So you are now out materials, your time, and also like $200 that you sent them. So always, always, always have a very well-defined sales platform that you can refer people to, and do not, under any circumstances, let people convince you to accept money or transaction or payment with any other method. It is the first way, or the easiest way, to weed out real buyers versus scams. You will save yourself so much time and money and heartache just by doing that. And when I do this now, I can keep those conversations and back and forth down to a matter of minutes. I haven't even spent or wasted a lot of time just conversing with these people, because you have to consider that too. Like when you're talking to potential clients, there's usually a lot of back and forth that happens. So there's a lot of questions, and they've got a lot of specific things that they really want to see, and you're just trying to like nail down exactly what the clients want. So there's a lot of back and forth that happens. It's quite a long process before I actually even start painting, and in time that I've spent with these clients and in conversation just before I even start painting or even get payment. So I'm also trying to keep my conversation down to a minimum so that I'm not wasting my time for someone who's just trying to scam me, because that's frustrating. No one wants to be scammed, and no one wants to invest 40 hours in something before they realize that they've been scammed. So that's my advice on how to deal with that stuff. This client came through my website. I don't know where they find me. I need to get better at figuring out where clients find me, because that will help me obviously sort of focus my advertising efforts. This is one thing that I'm working on in my business planning and my business brainstorming in the near or coming future. But yeah, so this painting is someone who contacted me via my website. I sent them my link. Well, they actually had the link, but I sent it again anyways, because they usually, clients, they want you to just send it to them anyways. So I resent the link, and then they picked the size. Actually, they wanted a custom size, so this is an 8x8. So I created an extra listing for them. That is now just a service that I offer. So it was 8x10, but they wanted a square and small, so I did 8x8. And yeah, so then they put the payment through, and I went ahead and started painting. So I'm almost getting to the end of these. And as you can see, I am layering all of this brand. So I'm using just acrylic paint, kind of a mix of golden acrylics and tri-arts. I'm not someone who is necessarily completely brand loyal. Sometimes I'll like one thing about a certain brand, but I would prefer something else about another brand. Generally speaking, I have been sticking to Liquitex only because I like the way their tops function, and I find with Golden sometimes I end up with paint dried out in my tubes, even though the cap is on, and I find that incredibly frustrating because they are expensive, and I've just never had that happen with Liquitex. I find the colors vibrant enough. I like the way they spread. So outside of that, I just don't ask myself a lot of questions. I just, do I like the colors? Am I enjoying the experience of using their packaging and all of that kind of fun stuff? And if the answer is yes, then I go with that product. So far, I mostly use Liquitex. Also some Golden in here right now. The raw umber color is Liquitex, and the Naples yellow is Golden, I believe. Oh, it's Triart actually. So yeah, I also use a bit of Triart. But I also have some problems with the caps on those as well. So I think I'll just be sticking to Liquitex in the future once I've gone through all of my paint tubes. And I also get it easily at the art store that I work at, so I can just pick it up on my shift when I run out. I don't know if there's anyone here with any questions or anything, or even if there's anyone around. Yeah, so these tend to look a bit desaturated for a while until I build up enough of my layers. And I need some more. I need some more sort of highlights and warmth in that area. So I'm just gonna pull out some of my transparent red oxide, mix it with some of my white. Gives me a nice sort of warm tone. I do mix water in with my acrylic. Some people say not to do it. It is technically breaking up the bonds in the paint. However, I'm going to be covering this in the end in a thick varnish. And these are just tiny little dash marks, and the varnish is going to create like a sealing surface over the entire painting. So this paint, at the end of the day, is not going anywhere. It is going to be very much stuck on here forever. So I don't really worry about that so much. I like acrylic for fur because I get these really precise, very tiny, very sharp little marks that look a lot just like fur. I find oil paint always has kind of a nice, fuzzy, out of focus feeling, which, makes it look kind of romantic, and it's great for skin and painting humans, and it's great for blurry backgrounds and clouds and all those fun things because of its ability to be blended. I find it harder to use to make incredibly sharp edges. So one thing that's important in painting is obviously to control your edges. So I usually just pick the materials that are going to best suit my goals for a certain project. And so right now, because I'm doing fur, acrylic suits best. And I just kind of slowly layer like this. Like I just slowly layer up my marks. It's kind of this is a really labor intensive process. but I think it's well worth it in the end. And actually, for me, I find it a bit meditative almost. So there's going to be some highlights here. Sometimes I go a little bit lighter than I'm supposed to because you will notice that acrylics darken as they dry. And also this paint is so thin right now. You can't see it because it's wet, so it's reading a little bit more opaque, but it's so thin that the darker grisaille colors are going to come through and it will kind of create a gradient on my brush strokes for me without having to work too hard. And then I can go over this again with some more of my pure color, and that will help bring the saturation back. So white desaturates. So if you want really saturated colors, you can go back in with pure color over top, and that will darken it because the value of pure color is always darker than the value of colors with white in it. But if you go light enough on the part underneath, it will sort of average out. So if you go a little bit too light on some of these first to get those sort of textures moving in here, and then you go back over with the pure color and it darkens, you're going to have a little bit more of a balancing effect in there. I'm just trying to get the lights right now, like the values. I always do a really good job on the grisaille, and then I start going in with color, and I have to continually adjust. But it's part of the fun process. And I really like the lifelike quality that these give, and as they are sort of like memorial pieces, whether or not the pet has passed, they're still commemorative pieces. So I do like to make them look like as much like the pet and as realistic as possible. You know, when we're living with our animals, we tend to really focus in on every little detail, and I've noticed myself just kind of sitting with my dog on quiet evenings and just focusing on every little hair on her head, the way the first swirls and the little color shifts and just all kinds of things. So I really like to paint every little fur on these guys. So I was given two photos, two different dogs. And the one photo is actually a lot more desaturated than the other one. So I ended up having to increase the saturation of the one photo just so that the colors read to a similar saturation, so that when I painted the two pieces and they're put together, they're going to look like they match. If I had followed the color more closely in the desaturated one and just kind of not really done any color adjustments, I would have had two paintings that look like they don't fit super well together. So that's one thing to consider also if you're doing multiple pets. You want to make sure that they read. And I also adjusted them for the composition. So I put a rule of third and on both images in Photoshop basically, and then I put the eyes in the same position on each canvas. So when they're sitting together on a wall or hanging on a wall together, they're going to look fairly equal together. I also cropped a lot of background off of both of them. It was unnecessary for the portraits. It's better to have less of that background and then have a little bit more of the pet visible. And you can actually see in my thumbnail the one reference for the one pup. And it's pulled out quite a bit. I will say with the studio, the one thing that I'm noticing is that there is a lot of ambient noise. We're in the city still, like we were in the city before, but we're in a tiny little place that didn't really have a lot of windows and stuff. Um, so we got a little bit less noise coming in. So we're kind of hearing stuff all day, every day now, which is fine. I'll get used to it. It might just make a little bit more sound in the videos for you. But I can't wait to show you guys my new studio. It's amazing. And you know, that's another thing. Like, we can get really blocked or feel really blocked by things that we don't have yet. Like, seriously, we were so tight in the last place. I felt blocked sometimes. It was really hard to function in there. My husband was really, really very supportive of me, even though I was literally taking up the entire living room with my canvases. And we only had a one bedroom, so we only had sort of like an open concept living, dining, art studio space. It was a disaster. and then we had our bedroom, which is just also incredibly tiny. So we actually have twice the square footage now, which is just amazing. And my husband also has his own office space. So we're not going to have to fight for sound space anymore. That was also an issue where I was working from home for a company last year. And sometimes they would want us on Zoom or team meetings, and they would complain that they could hear someone in the background all the time talking. Like, my husband is a project manager, so he is always in meetings, always on Teams. So it made it a little bit challenging for us. But we still get along super well, so that's definitely a plus and a bonus. So the brush that I'm using right now, it's called a rigger. It's that like really long, very skinny brush. These are really great for fur. They hold a lot of paint in the bristles, and I can just very gently sort of tap and drag the edge over the canvas, and it just gives these really nice, soft, wispy brush strokes. Little, tiny little furs and things. And I'm just trying to follow right now where the highlights of these furs go. Some little highlights in there. The harness is red. I will glaze that in after. I'm going to go back in and do some blacks, but here's the thing. They're not just black. I'm going to warm them up a bit. So I'm going to add some of this ashy raw umber color. Especially in areas like this where there's some warmth happening, and then I'll go darker again with the blacks. And something that you can do also to help make the colors really pop is put some leveling gel over this. It's basically just a clear acrylic medium that is glossy, and it self-levels, which means it will sort of go perfectly flat, or it'll flatten itself out or smooth itself out after you've put it down and it dries. But it helps to bring the shine back, and it also creates a layer so that any paint that you put on top of it is sitting a little bit above the other paint. And what it does is it helps the light go through, and then it sort of illuminates the whole thing from behind. So you're sort of getting extra lighting effects by doing that. Super handy. It's a little bit dark. I'm going to take this and just add a very small amount of white to it, because I do want a little bit more definition of hairs in here, but I don't want it to be as dark as it just went. Using very, very, very thin layers of paint here. And around the mouth too. Kind of see through there a little bit. Some of the darker colors coming through. So we're already at 26 minutes on this video, so you can see how long these actually take. I think I spend, I don't know, a good 40 hours on these usually. They're just a little labor of love. Then I'm going to take my blacks. So I haven't set up my sound and everything yet. We moved in on Friday, but we all had to obviously unpack and build a bunch of furniture again and sort of put things away. So things are very basically set up in here. I thought I would do a live because I haven't been online in a while, and just thought I'd drop in and say hi and let you see what I'm working on. But I will be sorting out everything for better filming in the very near future. I don't even have my microphone set up yet. So again, I know in here, it's just really, really, really dark. It's like the light has been totally, the black of the fur is totally absorbing the light. So I'm going to go as black as I can in here, and it'll actually help to give that shiny look. But again, I don't want to have no detail. So I am doing little sort of fur dash marks in the direction that the fur is traveling. Some up here. To finish off the eye. I've just done grisaille on there right now, but it's got very red little, or sort of orange colored eye. Let's go back and do that. Some dark in here. I might actually do a little coat of self-leveling gel for you guys on here when it's dry, just to show you what it does. Okay, so here I've sort of overpainted the white into the black, but it's actually the black fur that comes over the white fur. So usually I'll sort of lay all of it in generally in the grisaille, and then I will do the underneath first and then the over top after. So I'm just going to take my brush now and just very carefully bring these little wispy furs back over. And I have to watch out too because some of these are quite black. And I want to follow sort of the clump shape of the fur. There's like, the fur kind of sticks together in clumps even though it's really detailed. This is a little darker. But I also do want to get the little strands, and I want to make sure that I'm respecting that overall lighting scheme. I'm going to start pulling this little clump out here. And I will probably go back over with light again later and then dark again. And it's just really sort of a back and forth process until I get enough layers that it just looks right. Careful about the amount here and the direction. So I save the oil obviously till last. You can paint oil paint over top of acrylic, but you cannot put acrylic over top of oil. So I will completely finish the dog, and then I will do the background in my oil paint after, and then I will varnish the painting as though it's a complete oil painting. So again, you can put varnishes that are suitable for oils over top of hybrid paintings, but you can't put an acrylic varnish over. If I were to keep fully in acrylic on this painting, I would just use an acrylic varnish. But because I am going to be adding that oil in, I will be varnishing with the Gamsol. Is it Gamsol or Gambar? Gambar, I think. Gamsol is the mineral spirits. Gambar. And actually, the fun thing about the Gambar is that it's a workable, or not workable, it's a varnish that was designed to go onto touch dry oil paintings. Because if you're doing commissions, your clients want the painting. They don't want to wait for 6 months for it to dry enough to varnish. Sometimes painters will deliver the painting and then offer to varnish after 6 months or so, like basically get the painting back and throw a coat of varnish on it and then send it off or resend it off. But I am kind of the opinion that clients don't want to sort of mess around like that. They kind of just want to buy their painting and take it home, and then that's it. So I prefer to use the Gambar because it will allow the painting to continue drying underneath that coat of varnish. And after I started varnishing my paintings, I couldn't stop because it really helps to pull out the colors and it helps to protect them, and then you can clean them a little bit more easily and all kinds of stuff. Oh, and it also harmonizes the specular quality of the canvas. So right now, as you can probably, you can't see so much, but right now my blacks are quite shiny, but my whites are quite matte, and it looks strange. So by putting a coat of varnish over it, all of my painting will look the same shininess, basically. So it will read a little bit more harmoniously. And yeah, once you start doing that, I feel like you can't go back. So if you're one of those people that's asking the question of, do I have to varnish my painting? Well, no, you don't have to. But I really think when you start, you're not going to want to go back. That is my humble opinion on it. It does so much for the overall presentation quality of the piece. And, you know, if you're anything like me, or like most people, if you're doing something and you're investing this much time into your learning and into developing your skills and getting your work out there, you want it to look as professional and put together as possible. And taking those extra few little steps can really make all the difference. Around the mouth is very dark here also. And then it kind of just breaks off into these little wispies where we can see the dark through the fur there. And I do like to keep, for the most part, not every time, but I do like to keep the background quite minimal on these, just because painting is about the animal and not the landscape. This is way too desaturated still. I don't have enough paints down for the color to be coming through yet, so this whole thing just looks a bit still desaturated. But I think you're starting to see sort of the overall lighting effect on here. This is going to be bright red. This part is going to be dark. I'm just going to darken this quickly. And then there's lighter fur that comes in there, so I'll go with that. This is still very basic grisaille down here. Grisaille is basically just the French word for like gray, gris in French. So grisaille is like black and white painting. It makes it so much easier to just handle value instead of trying to handle color and value. And color sits on value. So if you can get the value right in your paintings, they're going to look a lot better than if you don't get the value right but get the color right. Ideally, what you want is both. So highly suggest, if you're just getting into painting and you're kind of struggling with some things and you're not getting sort of the visual quality and the impact that you want out of them, definitely take some time and just do your paintings in black and white first and then glaze the colors over. And I do have a whole tutorial on value and glazing on my Patreon. I'll put the link in the description so you can go check it out. It's a really powerful technique to get a lot of realism. At some point, you'll find you don't need it as much. You can kind of balance your values and color at the same time, but even still, most artists will do some sort of value study or painting underneath their final top coats. Just gives you a direction to move in. You can see how it sort of tightens up. Like I'm tightening everything up here, but this part is still really loose that I did it with fatter brushes. Again, I'm trying to get the direction of the fur, but I do tend to sort of stick with fatter brushes and more generalized shapes on the underneath parts. So areas like this, yeah, I should talk about this for sure. When I go over with oil, all these little hairs that I'm doing right now are going to disappear. So often what I will do then is I will just fix these little edges up in oil also. And I can use the exact same color. So if you have the same colors between your oils and your acrylics, you will have no problem sort of doing those edges and having it look seamless. I'm going to lighten that a little bit. I need to put some color in there. And I just feel like I didn't really do enough on my grisaille in this one little spot. It's too dark. You gotta be careful because things do darken as they dry, so this is the challenge with acrylic. They're hard to master that way. Okay, for this eye, I already have some grisaille painted in there. I'm just going to take some of my transparent red oxide, nice and thin. And I actually have to be quite careful because there's some spots on this eye that are cooler. So I'm just putting it on and dabbing it off. This will bring the gray back a little bit. So that'll be on the cooler parts of the eye where the light's hitting. And then on the bottoms here and sort of, you see around the top here. This whole area is more saturated. And I can do another coat after that dries. Now I feel like in this area, add some orange to it. Okay, in this area I need a little bit more sort of brush strokes just for some of these little furs. That's too fat. It takes a really gentle touch on these to get the marks that I want to make. So I'm barely touching the canvas. If there's not enough contrast between the values or temperature on these marks, it'll sort of blend together. So you kind of need to really jump enough just that you can see these little fur marks. That's another interesting tip though too, if you want to make something soften and kind of disappear with acrylics, bring the value and color or temperature closer together and you can kind of soften things out that way. And now this is actually going to become the darker color of this area. So it's a lighter color up here, but it can actually become the darker color. I'm just going to add a little bit more orange. Trying to get this saturation back in here. And also respect the value. And respect the temperature. It's a big balancing act. This is the one out of the two I've been struggling with a little bit more. But this is also the image that was more desaturated. So I've been finding getting the color sort of up to where I need it to be has just been a little bit more challenging. I know it's a long process, but I hope you're enjoying it, at least somewhat meditative. I find it hard to sometimes talk the whole way through. I like to, get in the zone and focus. I gotta watch that this doesn't smooth out too much, which it's doing right now. There's a lot more lighting variation that actually happens in here in the reference. So I usually just go a little bit too dark then with some little furs, and then go a little bit light, but just very subtly. But it all kind of works together. I'm gonna use a little bit more of this color over here. Whoops, too much water. If I put too much water, I can just wipe it off as long as it's still really, really wet. It'll wipe completely off. No sweat. I'm always so anxious when I'm giving these to my clients. I spend so much time trying to get it just perfect. I'm always worried that they're not going to be happy with it. But I've never had, well, it's not true. It's not that I haven't had that ever happen where someone wasn't happy. Everyone's been happy, but I have had someone bring one back for a little bit of adjustment. And what happened was the photo that they sent me didn't have fully accurate colors of the pet, but it wasn't a photo that was like obviously desaturated a little bit. So I didn't know. So they ended up sending later some more images in different lighting scenarios. So I took the painting back and then sort of used those photos just to adjust the colors. And then they were super happy with it. And I'm always happy to work with clients like that. I want them to be fully satisfied with their work. So it was absolutely my pleasure to take it back and do those little changes. And they were quite minor, actually. The color wasn't so far off. It was just a bit dark, and it was a little bit cooler in temperature than what the actual dog was. The dog was a little bit more golden than it was appearing in the reference. That's why sometimes it's actually, if you're a client, it's better, or even if you're an artist, just ask your clients to get more than one photo in different lighting situations, because then you probably have like a main photo that you're going to work from, but you can get a lot of other information and very important information when you have more than one reference, and it's usually color information that I'm looking for. I will be back in a second with my clear leveling gel to show you what that does to the surface. So this is what it looks like, golden clear leveling gel. And it's just like this. It's just plastic, basically. And obviously I need a different brush because I don't want to cover a big space with a little brush. So I'm just going to grab this one just because it's nice and flat. And I will give it a little rinse in water just because I don't want anything in it, including dust. And then I'm just going to wipe it a bit with my hand. There's some water there, that's fine. But I'm just going to take some on my brush. This is essentially, it's pretty dry, but I can layer it, it's no problem. And then I'm just going to brush it over the top. And I'm going to add a little bit of water to it just to help it move. I'll get a better setup for my camera. It's so ghetto right now. Oops. So ghetto. You can see it kind of has a blue sheen to it right when it goes down. But it will dry perfectly clear, and it will actually get rid of some of the canvas texture too, which is nice on these smaller pieces, because I find sometimes on these little detail pieces, the texture can be a little bit overwhelming and it kills the light. So if you want a painting that's more luminous, you want it to be on the smoothest surface possible. Oops. All right. So I'm gonna let this just sit. And you can see already it's bringing the colors out. But it's also adding a layer that is a little bit thick and transparent that will let the light go through my layers of paint and will make the painting look more luminous and light filled at the end. This is also a trick from the old masters. I need to let this dry, so I'm going to move it. But the old masters used to use glazing techniques like that. So this is the other one, and sort of this is, as you can see, I'm having an easier time of it. It's a little bit more saturated already. Obviously, this still needs work, but this one's more into the color range that I need it to be. And again, I think I'm going to do the black background in oils. And okay, so I'm going to grab my reference photo. This is a desaturated kind of like, actually I nailed the color, I'm surprised, but it's kind of like desaturated maroon. Here I need more color in general, but it's a larger surface, so I'm actually just going to take a bigger flat brush. Actually, I like these too. I really like angle brushes. I might take this one, and I'm just going to take a very small amount of this raw umber, and I'm just going to brush it over the surface. That's ground, and then this is really dark because that's the leg. So this little patch will be green. And then up in here, so I'm going to do a little trick. This actually gets quite light. The sun's hitting his fur here. It goes a little bit more desaturated and lighter, but I'm going to put a coat of color under it first, so it's not reading as sort of not painted. And then I will build up that warmth after. Same with in here. It's like very desaturated. I'm gently brush over without going too much. Just to add some color. And actually, this dog is a little bit less ashy. There's some different colors happening. It'll be all right. Just kind of let this color come in here very gently. And darken where it turns into shadow by just allowing a little bit more paint over it. And then you can see this sort of curving. The harness piece actually has some brown tones in it too, but it's more black, so I'll have to adjust those so it's a little bit less, just similar to the rest. I want it to differentiate a little bit. I might actually, it's too much. I'm gonna add a little bit of warmth to some of this. Getting the overall. And then I need some more highlights in here. Kind of accidentally got rid of them. Again, I'm gonna leave sort of the edge area for now because I know that I'm gonna go in with oils. And I'm quiet again. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. See, I've got one little thumbs up, so I know that someone's around. I know that it is a work day. Most of you are probably at work. As a full-time artist, I'm also currently at work. All right, so an hour long so far. This is when I start getting a little bit tired, especially after talking so much. So I need some water. So I'm going to take a little break now and get myself something to drink. But thank you so much for tuning in. I cannot wait to share with you guys the setup of my new art studio. I hope you're inspired to set up your own space with what I do in here. And thank you for joining me and keeping me company while I paint these cute little pups. Yeah, there's the two of them. Actually, quickly before I sign off, you can see how far I have to go. They're getting more even, but you can see how this one is still a little bit desaturated. There's still work to do on both to harmonize them. I was tempted to do the same lines here, but then I worry about the horizon being too low and making this one look strange. I will probably do a little test in Photoshop, and if it works, I will make that adjustment after in oil. Oh, and very quickly, one last little job on this one. Oh no, there's white in this paint. All right, if there's any white in your brush, you do not want to put leveling gel, so I'm just gonna call it quits and take a break. And I will see you guys in the next video.